I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. You simply pour a can into your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. So pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon. This is episode number 108. Today in the show, we're joined by Tawney, the CEO and president of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, to discuss public lands conservation and what BHA is doing that we deer hunters might care about. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Sitka Gear. And today, as I mentioned, we've got Tawney of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers with us, and we're going to be discussing what Backcountry Hunters and Anglers is, why it's relevant to us deer hunters across the country, probably more so than many of us might think, and what's going on with public lands conservation and policy across the country. So, again, this is going to be a very interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to it. Unfortunately, again this week, because of some scheduling issues, my co-host Dan Johnson isn't able to join us, but he told me to say hi and let you all know he'll be back soon. So with that said, we are not going to beat around the bush, but before we get Land on the show, we need to briefly pause to thank our sponsors of this podcast, Sitka Gear, for stepping up and making this show possible. Now, we'll be continuing with our Sitka Stories series soon, but today I wanted to mention something that I've been using a lot lately. So as many of you know, I've been out here in Idaho exploring the mountains, and a new piece of Sitka gear that I just received has become my everyday layer for just about everything out here, and that's the Fanatic hoodie in solid black. You probably have heard me rave about the Fanatic hoodie for whitetail hunting, as that piece in Optifade camo has become a layer that I wear on every single one of my deer hunts, with its built-in face mask, kangaroo pocket, micro-gridded fleece, and built-in hand mitts. But in solid black, this piece now is my favorite item to wear on hikes, fly fishing, bagging peaks, and just around town too. There's something about that thin gridded fleece and the close to body fit that just makes this layer warm enough in cool to cold temperatures, but also still comfortable on sunny, warmer days too. So if you haven't checked out the Fanatic hoodie, whether the camo version for whitetail hunting or in solids as an everyday outdoor layer, it's one item that I would just recommend so highly. So to learn more, you can visit sitkagear.com. And now let's get to the meat and potatoes of our episode today and welcome Tawney onto the podcast. All right, with us on the line now is Tawney. Welcome to the show, Lan.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat, and I realized we just talked a second ago offline that we just crossed paths. You were right here where I'm at, weren't you?
Yeah, down in one of the most beautiful places in the world, Driggs, Idaho, which is just outside of like the Teton Mountains, which is, gorgeous peaks and river runs through it. It's almost as good as Montana.
Yeah, it's pretty spectacular country. I'm bummed I missed you. We were probably driving past each other at some point. So, did you have a good time out here?
I did. I had some events in Jackson Hole. They have the Western Governors Association meeting was going on, so I had some things I had to do along with that, and was able to, our Montana chapter had a camp out that weekend before, so I went from Headwater State Park, which is just outside of Bozeman, and drove down through the park and actually got to fish and caught quite fish on the Fire River and the Gibbon River, and then did events. So it was a nice little tour.
Nice, yeah. I've been testing the waters up in the fire hole too. I've had a little bit of success, but you probably know what you're doing better than I do. So glad you did well.
I don't know about that. I think they were just maybe I got lucky and they were hungry that day. One thing I will tell you is that that river is so warm, with all the geo kind of activity that's going on there, and geothermal, I guess, activity. And I just wonder what happens to them later in the summer, and fishing at this time of year, it was still cold enough probably for those trout, but you got to wonder what happens later in the year.
I wonder the same thing because, it fishes so well early, but I got to believe it's either they shut it down, I don't know, but either they shut it down or the fish themselves just can't be too active when it gets so warm. Like you said, it's already pretty warm. So
Yep.
It's interesting. So you've been on this big trip. You're back at work now. I guess speaking of your work, for those that aren't familiar, I briefly introduced you as the CEO of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, but can you tell us a little bit more about how you got to that point, what your background is?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a fifth-generation Montanan. Very lucky to grow up here in Montana, and my father and mother really drove kind of us kids getting outside, and my dad ended up being the lawyer for the Elk Foundation for the first 10 years until he passed away. And so, from a young age, I was on my dad's back fishing, hiking up steep mountains where I literally had to step in his footsteps because the snow was so deep, and if I did not do that, I wouldn't be able to make it. And so I think I'm trying to do the same thing with my kids, and because that background gave me this kind of appreciation for the great outdoors and the kind of the heritage that we have, but then also this drive to try to protect it and make sure that our future generations have it. So I feel real lucky that way, and I'll tell you that I was out in Seattle going to school, kind of screwing around, getting a business degree, and my father got real sick, and then he ended up passing away, and so that brought me back to Montana. And while that is the most significant kind of tragic event in my life, and still think about him every single day, is that it kind of brought me back to Montana and grounded me, and really that's when I engaged and kind of decided this is kind of what I wanted to do. And I got a wildlife biology degree here at the University of Montana, and kind of my senior year there, I kind of figured out that I wanted to be more involved in policy than kind of on the ground. I love being in the field, but I wanted to be able to impact large kind of policies. And so got done with my degree, and then I started volunteering for the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Alliance, which was the precursor to the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. It was brand new at that point. Same guy that had started the Elk Foundation, or one of the guys that started the Elk Foundation, Bob Munson, he was heading it up. And so I started volunteering for him. I think I worked as a volunteer for 6 months doing data entry and not real fun stuff, but at least got my foot in the door, and got a part-time job, and then eventually got a full-time job with them. And that was really, I think, such a great opportunity for me because it was such a small organization, and I was able to, one, meet a lot of people within the conservation field, but also be involved. And I ended up being their national grassroots coordinator before I left, and I really appreciate my time with them and a lot of the leaders that I had there. And one of them was Jim Range, and Jim used to work for Howard Baker, who was he was the majority leader in the Senate, and he was just he helped him write the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and that was back when Republicans and Democrats alike really worked together to work on our kind of conservation heritage. So it was great to learn kind of some things from him, and that set me up then I went to work for the National Wildlife Federation after about 3.5 years working with them, and became their national kind of sportsman's outreach coordinator. And so I was in charge of all the sportsman's campaigns within National Wildlife Federation, and then specifically ran a couple, one around the 1872 mining law and another one around the restoration of the Mississippi River Delta. And so was able to work with, they have chapters all over the country, or I guess they call them affiliates, grassroots kind of hunters and anglers, been in the game for a long time. So I got to work with those volunteers and mobilize them. And And really, I was happy there, and I'd become a member of BHA right when they started back in 2004, and I was always kind of attracted to their mission. And then I started, they had a search committee for this new job that they were hiring, and I really, I didn't take a real serious look at it, and until one night, I really looked at BHA, and the car had been built, and nobody had, really knew how to drive it yet, and so I was able to take the skills that I've learned over the last decade and a half from those other two organizations, and then bring them to, a new organization that really was in its infancy. While it was started in 2004, it had all been volunteer-driven and great volunteers. I know that when I worked for National Wildlife Federation and we do a fly-in out to D.C. on one issue or another, that I always looked to folks from backcountry hunters and anglers because they not only did they know their place because they're out there, not just a couple days a year, but as much as they can, and in some cases, it's 200 or so days a year, and they knew their place, but they're also they knew the policies and were very passionate about protecting these places. And so you get them up there, and they'd just be so effective in front of our elected officials. And so I always had kind of a reverence to them. And when I came here, I was the first kind of full-time employee that we had at that point, and now we've grown to this large organization, and we're still small, I think, within the sportsman kind of conservation community, but where we were 3 years ago is really pale in comparison to where we are now. And I think that besides kind of having a good idea, which we're the sportsman's voice for our wild public lands, waters, and wildlife, is that that's resonated even more, I think, with people because this idea of adventure and challenge, it shows up in Spartan races and Tough Mudders, etc. And people are looking for that challenge, and the only places that you can actually experience that are on public lands and these wild public lands, and we're not making any more of them. Nobody's gonna, there's not a concrete Association of America that is protecting concrete to make sure that nobody hits that up, right?
Thank goodness.
These public. Yeah, right. And they can make that stuff anytime, and it's something that you don't have to worry about losing. But these public lands that we have, especially the wild pieces of them, we're not making any more of that, and that's what makes us unique as kind of Americans compared to the rest of the world. And it's where you and I and every American can experience the same things that really have been going on for centuries. That's a pretty cool thing. So, I'm having fun, more fun than I have in my entire career, and I get to work with a lot of great people, both volunteers and staff, so it's a good thing.
That sounds incredible. Now, our audience is, serious deer hunters comprise the majority of our audience, and they're all across the country, but probably the majority are in the Midwest, East, and the southern part of the United States. Now, I know that the backcountry hunters and anglers started in the West, and I think you've got a slightly larger contingent in that part of the country, so I'm curious if there might be a large portion of our audience that doesn't really know who you guys are and what you do. Can you just lay out the groundwork? What is BHA? What do you guys do? What do you stand for?
Yeah, for sure. So, gave you the tagline kind of first, as a sportsman's voice for our wild public lands, waters, and wildlife. And so what that really means is, in shorthand, is that we want to make sure that we keep public lands in public hands, so that's access, and make sure that, you have a place to go. And then once you get there, we want to make sure that there's, the good fish and wildlife habitat, so that we don't, so we have the opportunities that we all care about. And so, within that, there's really a bunch of things that we worked on. And so the first one, kind of that access and opportunity. And access and opportunity right now, there's this movement, that seems to be growing every day on the sale or transfer of public lands. And, once you lose these public lands, you don't get them back, and so we think that's a really dumb idea. And so there's that piece within the access kind of bucket, I will call it. In addition, there's a thing called the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and that was established back in 1964. And, we advocate for that because it's the number one access tool in this country. And so that access like to either isolated public lands or just getting better access to public lands that we have now. Like that's the tool to do it. And so we want to make sure that that is carried into the future. Next piece is probably our biggest bucket, and that's kind of just fish and wildlife habitat. And so we want to make sure that that once you get to these public lands, that you have the opportunity to hunt and fish. And so there's things like the Clean Water Act, this overarching piece that makes sure that our waters stay healthy. And like just recently, the administration came out with some new rules that restored protections to temporary wetlands. And so these are wetlands that ducks are using right now, vitally important. They're only kind of wet this time of year, especially in the prairie pothole region. So North Dakota, South Dakota, a little bit of Minnesota, and a little bit of Montana. And this is where the duck factory basically is. We want to make sure that those places are protected. And it also protects temporary streams, so places that are, again, wet right now that are being used for spawning habitat and are vital to kind of fish populations. So we worked real hard on making sure that those protections were restored. Other pieces, within that would be like funding. Funding right now has been going down for our fish and game agencies, and so they can't do the things that they want to do. And whether that's restoration stuff, whether that's making sure we know what is happening on the ground through studies, they can't do that. And one of the main reasons they can't do that as much anymore is because one, their budget's been going down, but two, we're having other fires every single year, and these fires, they take up 50%, let's say, of the Forest Service budget right now, and so that's why they cannot do everything else, is because these fires happen every single year, and they just don't have the appropriate money. So we're working to get that fire off of kind of normal Forest Service budget and treat it just like any other natural disaster. So floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, we feel like that fits there. And so there's a host of things I think that we work on there. I mean, one I would say that I haven't brought up yet is that we really try to work at a collaborative effort and look at national forests and as a kind of a watershed. And instead of only looking at trying to protect these wild public lands, is like how would this all look if it was managed for everyone? And so a good example of that is something we're doing in Idaho. It's called the Clearwater Basin Collaborative. And really there we've worked with timber folks, we work with ATV folks, local county commissioners, other kind of conservation organizations, and timber folks, and really said, here's this whole forest. Like, let's figure out what is best for all of us. And so within that, there's 500,000 acres of new wilderness. There's 200 miles of wild and scenic river, 200 miles of the longest continuous ATV route in the west, and then increased timber harvest in the front country. And so it's a path forward for everybody. Is it perfect for everyone? Probably not. But I think, as these conversations have happened over the last decade, folks really have come to the idea that we'd rather have a path forward than nothing at all. And so everybody can live with it, and so now hopefully we're going to move forward with it. So that's that kind of land protection piece that we engage in. And the final piece that I haven't really talked about, but kind of the final bucket, is fair chase. And as we as hunters think about what that means to us, especially in the growing technology world, we want to be a leading voice on that. And that was stuff that was started probably in the 1870s, I think, is when Forest and Stream, which was the precursor to Field and Stream, first came out, and really that talked about kind of the sportsman's code and how you act out there and as a steward and how you pursue game. And so you fast forward to today, and two of the issues that we're working on there, I think, really fly in the face of that kind of that sportsman ethic. And the first one is with drones. And drones have been used by the military for a while now, and they're becoming more and more popular on the civilian side, and becoming more and more sophisticated and affordable. And so folks are starting to use drones for scouting and during the hunting season. And it's like you could call me up from Michigan and say, hey, I want to come hunt an elk out in Montana, and make sure you find one before I get there. And I could send up my drones, and by the time you got here, I could give you a GPS coordinate, and I could put you right on that bull, and you can go shoot it. And to us, that has nothing to do with fair chase. Really, it's not fair to hunt. So we've helped banned the use of drones for hunting and scouting. I think in 13 states now, and we're working on more. Some states that feel like they have that covered just through their aviation kind of rule. We're making sure that they insert drones to those rules. And then also, the thing with a drone versus an airplane is you can hear an airplane, for miles. And a drone has really got to be right above you for you to hear it and then see it. And so they're much less invasive, I would say. And so there's much more propensity that, people will be doing things. And so instead of like the 24-hour rule that's in place in a lot of states on airplanes, we went for the whole season, and that just seems to work. And, the wardens like that a lot better. The second one in there is one that's near and dear to my heart, is really this idea of hunting animals behind a fence. And, I think I talked earlier in this conversation about how people are kind of thirsting for that adventure and challenge. And that could, this is the antithesis of that, And it's folks shooting animals in a pen. They don't tell that story, right? But when they shoot that animal in the pen, they put that head up on the wall and brag about it. Like, they're not bragging that they were, in an enclosure shooting that animal. They're telling some story about they were on a peak in Montana or in Idaho or wherever. And to me, it's the fair chase aspect. It's also, there's a disease factor there where these things are kind of vectors for disease. And then the last piece is that, if these animals get out, what that does to the the population's genes as these things infiltrate. So that's just a short snapshot, Mark, of kind of what we work on in those three buckets. But, what separates us, I think, from every other sportsman's organization out there is that we really work on public policy, on public lands, basically strictly. And so, we're not like the Elk Foundation out, buying wintering habitat for elk or, duck habitat for ducks like Ducks Unlimited, which is all great work. We're really focused on public lands, and and with that, we have a growing grassroots constituency all across the country. And you mentioned we started in the West, which we did. We started around a campfire in Oregon, which all good things start at a campfire. And we have all Western states covered with chapters now, but now we're moving into the Midwest, and we've had one for a while in Minnesota, but just picked up one in your home state of Michigan and in Wisconsin, and we've got chapters in Pennsylvania and New York, and then all the New England states. So, I think when you think about public lands, a lot of people think that they're only located in the West. And I look at like the Huron-Manistee kind of national forest in Michigan. Yeah. Like, there's public land. Those are large, significant swaths. In North Carolina, South Carolina, there's a national forest there that's like over 1 million acres. So there's still those places. Yes, the West has more, but for you all, we were talking earlier about how you're going to come out here and hunt, and I'm guessing that's going to be on public land, so it's important that way. And then those public lands back home, there might not be as many of them, which I think makes them even that much more important. And so, while we started in the West, we're resonating across the country because people are starting to understand the importance of public lands, and that all of us, like every single person on this that's listening to this, is a public landowner. Like we own that land. The federal government manages it for us, but all of us have ownership in that. And to me, I think there could be nothing more American than that. And the more people find out that they own this large, I think it's like 646 million acre estate where we can all live like kings, I think they want to step up and make sure it's there for future generations.
Absolutely. And I think it's such an important point to bring up for those of us that, as you mentioned, maybe we don't have as much public land here in the Midwest or on the East Coast. And I think sometimes we forget that all of that is available to us, and that it is, like you said, we can live like kings out there. It's ours to use, but it's also ours to protect, and that we are also responsible for it. So I think to your points, there is so much relevance to people where I live or in the South or in the East Coast in what you guys are doing. Like you said, you're protecting public lands, not just out West, but all across the country. You're working for fair chase. You're working to promote fair chase. That's very, very impactful on a lot of what we do as deer hunters. The high fence thing is a major issue. The drone thing is a major issue. I think that really there's a universal countrywide relevance to your mission and what you're trying to do. And I think one of the big things that I am trying to do is I want to make sure as many people know about it as possible, because it is relatively unique what you guys are doing. There aren't any organizations that are focused really primarily on public land policy, public land issues, and not species specific. You guys are working across the board for wildlife, for habitat, and that's what has really drawn me to your mission, to your organization. So I became a member, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and now I'm actually on the board of directors for the Michigan chapter, and I'm really excited about what we're doing here in my home state. And I just, call to action for everybody listening. I mean, what you guys are doing impacts all of us, and I think we can all, help that cause too by becoming a part of it. So I guess my next question then is, for those that are interested in this mission, who like what you're saying, who that resonates with, what's entailed when they join? How do you join? What's it cost? What's in it for them? How can they help?
Great. And by the way, thank you for stepping up. I think there's a Roosevelt quote that I just absolutely love. There's many of his, but it goes like this. It's like, I admire the man who takes the next step, not those that theorize about the 200th. And like you becoming a member, you stepping up and being on the board in Michigan and help, start that chapter. Like, that's stepping up. That's doing something, right? Like, we're in the arena, and I just, I think, I hope more people, do that. And so, big thank you from me, Mark.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Our membership is our single membership is super cheap. It's $25. That's going out with a couple of friends and having a couple of beers. It's not that much money. And so what that gets you, that gets connected into our kind of network. And so, something's happening. We send you an action alert and provide an opportunity for you to get involved really quickly. So there's that piece. If you have a local chapter in your state, this automatically connects you to that local chapter, and so you can get involved kind of with what they're doing at a local level. And then it gets you our magazine that comes out 4 times a year. And this magazine, I think, and I'm biased, obviously, but I think it's one of the best magazines that's out there right now, is that it's this mix of kind of conservation policy as well as kind of the backcountry experience, and it's getting better and better with each issue, and I think it's a big asset that you get. That's our level there. There's a family membership at $35 that we definitely we're family oriented and would love to have more families involved. There's a $100 supporting member that's yearly that I think if you want to step up a little bit more. And then there's the final piece with our life membership. And I think our life membership right now, like, you can almost you can't afford not to become a life member right now. I'm not sure how long we'll have these premiums that are so awesome, but you gotta. Right now, if you become a life member at $1,000, you get opportunity to have either a Seek Outside tent, who's one of our great corporate partners based out of Colorado. They're actually making their tents in Colorado, and so you get a little teepee tent there with a titanium stove. Or you can, choose a micro carry 380, a Kimber micro carry 380, and each one of those, there's not much difference between their retail value and the actual $1,000. And so again, I don't think you can. I mean, if you like what you're hearing and you think that either one of those is an attractive kind of piece, you can't afford not to do it right now. And then, we move into the 1500, which is a larger teepee with a titanium stove, and then a 45, and the Kimber 45 ACP. They're custom too, real nice pistol. And then we move into the 2500 level, and I think that's their Seek Outside's largest teepee, which is a 12-man stove again there. And then if you want, you can get the Mountain Ascent rifle from Kimber, which is the lightest production rifle on the market, and it's just phenomenal. The artwork that's kind of gone into this, like the fluting of the bolt and everything, is absolutely gorgeous, and it's a gun that performs too. That thing retails for about $2,100. So you're getting a good deal on either one of those, and I encourage folks to take a look at it. And again, I'm not sure how long those will last. They'll last throughout the rest of the year, but they've been really generous to us, and who knows how long that lasts. So if you can, get it in now.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I was very, very tempted. It's on my to-do list here soon to just make it happen, because I was like, wow, I want another handgun. I think this is a good way to go about doing it and support the right cause. So I like that. Now, you had talked a little bit about some of the things going on farther east here in the Midwest and your new chapters and everything. Are there any actual current events or issues happening in those parts of the country that you guys are working on? I know, like, for example, there's some stuff going on in the Boundary Waters, I think, but is there any, could you tell us more about that or anything else that you guys are keeping your eye on in this part of the country?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk to, I mean, I think the Boundary Waters is a good example. Very special place. It's the most visited wilderness in the entire country, and that's because it's so darn accessible. You can take young kids in there, you can take grandparents in there, and but at the same time still get lost because of just the nature of, I think, of all the different kind of lakes that are connected there. And so it's been around for a long time, and it's a highly valued for hunting and fishing, and also just kind of the clean water that it provides those local communities. And there's a couple mines that are proposed on the southern end that I think one of them is only like a quarter mile from the edge, and all the water flows north there. And so, any kind of spillage would go into the Boundary Waters and taint that forever. And, there's not a mine that hasn't leaked, and so it's not about if that's going to happen, it's a matter of when. And so it's something we're really engaged in. And what's awesome is that we've been working on this, with our members for a while now, and then a greater kind of coalition. And just here in the last week, the Chief of the Forest Service announced that they're going to look at those two mines, their permits, and see if it's not a place that they should be permitted. And so there'll be a public comment period kind of on that. I'm not exactly sure how they're structuring that, but that'll start June 20th and kind of go through July 19th, I think it is. So it's like about a 30-day comment period. And so there's an opportunity to get involved in that right now. And even if you don't, go to the Boundary Waters, never been there, maybe never will go there, like, it's one of those places that you just love knowing that it's out there, and knowing that if you did want to go, you could. So that's one thing. I think one thing I'd call out is what you guys did in Michigan that I'm watching, but kind of letting you guys take the lead on.
Yeah. Because
you're there and you know it, and that's this idea of we talk about the sale and transfer of public lands at a federal level. But one of the reasons, we are worried about them being transferred to the states is because the states have divested a lot of the lands that was originally granted to them, and that's happening right in your state right now. I mean, you know more about this than me, but there's state land that's being put on the auction block, and while that makes sense sometimes because of the the quality of land that is, and that it might not be the greatest fish and wildlife habitat, like there's stuff on the chopping block that is there, and to me, you guys are at the kind of tip of the spear there. I've already gone to the state legislature, which I think is awesome, and have kind of hit the ground running. So I think, those two would be stuff I call out. I mean, I think some of the stuff we've talked about, whether that's drones or like game farms that are kind of universal, definitely are stuff that's happening. We've got some stuff we're looking at over in Maine right now. They're looking at designating either a national park or a national monument up there in the Maine woods, and it's a private entity. A woman that was part of the bees kind of lip balm kind of like conglomerate.
Burt's Bees, right?
Burt's Bees, yeah, thank you. Sorry, I lost that for a second, but Burt's Bees. And so she has this property up there that she wants to gift to the United States, and so we're trying to make sure that there's opportunities to hunt and fish up there, and that that landscape is maintained and it's conserved. So those are a couple. I mean, I think what's unique about this country, and we're a huge geography, but when stuff goes on out in D.C., there's stuff that that we need. Elected officials in Wisconsin and Michigan and Minnesota, New York, Pennsylvania, these places that the legislation may only impact the West, but they still vote on it, right? And so, being able to educate those folks on all sorts of different issues, you got to have those people in place. And so, expanding our reach with the chapters in the kind of the upper Midwest. I call it like the Great Lakes region, and then kind of the New England and kind of like New York and Pennsylvania. Like not only can they help us work on more stuff in those local areas, but they can also help us at the federal level. So, again, it may look different. The public lands might be a little bit different, but, man, we want to take care of them. And then, there's a lot of private property, especially like with timber companies that are in the east that, aren't necessarily open to the public. And so, getting some public access to those pieces is something that, I think some of our local chapters are working on east of the Mississippi well. And I think that's it's a great thing for them to be doing.
Yeah. So something I think some people maybe wonder about when they hear about all these different types of issues that you guys are working on or these topics of concern, they might wonder, what are you actually doing? Like, how do you work on that? I mean, is it you and your team going and talking to legislators, or is it just mobilizing members to call and write letters, or how is it that BHA actually makes an impact on these issues that are, of importance to you and us?
I think that's great. So let's take the boundary water, since that's just something that's like real topical right now. So, and that's something proactive that we're trying to do, and then I'll talk about defense after that. So this is a place, that we've described already, and that we really care about. And so, one of these mines, kind of like the permanent problem going forward, like we've been out to D.C. talking to people and within the administration saying this is not a good idea. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do this. And so, we've been doing that for a while now, and then just for that, so those are kind of, intense kind of one-on-one meetings. And so that now has precipitated kind of this process where they're going to look at these, like the permits of these mines. And so now, once that process starts, like we really want to turn on the grassroots. It's not so much anymore about like kind of these one-on-one meetings, but it's about mobilizing the masses. And so we're going to be driving a petition that gets folks to voice their opinion to the administration about why they think it's a bad idea, and so that they have a way to engage, and then that we just overwhelm them with numbers, and then they hopefully make the right decision. So, really that's how we work things is really mobilizing grassroots, and sometimes that's not signing a petition or writing a letter or making a phone call. That's writing an opinion editorial that gets placed in a paper. That's showing up at a meeting, like there's going to be a meeting on the Boundary Waters. I think it's July 13th in Duluth, and so we're going to mobilize a bunch of people to go to that. So there's many ways for grassroots folks to get involved. And then once in a while we take people out to D.C. and I will tell you that's my most fun is I've gone out there enough where it doesn't overwhelm me anymore, and it's fun to watch somebody kind of let their eyes get big when they're out in D.C. And then for them to make an impact, they really do make an impact. So for me, it's a pretty cool thing, and that's kind of the way we work, I would say. Some of the stuff, like I guess public lands all have kind of management regimes that they go under, and some of that's like they go over travel management. That's about every 15 years, and then resource management plans, which are about every 15 years. And so that's like on the ground specific to that specific forest or piece of BLM property. And so then we engage people there where we look at kind of how that forest is being managed, and we comment on things that we think they should continue to do, and then we comment on things on that we think that they should do differently. And so that's a way for us to engage in that process as well. And then with drones, majority of that happened through Fish and Game commissions, and so we were actively going to meetings there and mobilizing people to write letters and stuff to Fish and Game commissioners, and then ultimately they made great decisions on drones. A couple of those had to happen at the state legislature, and so that's informing people and then getting them to like committee meetings and having them call their local elected officials. So really, like we're a mobilizer, and then into one-on-one kind of higher level meetings as well.
So what's that like when you go to D.C. or you go and meet with these different agencies or commissions or whatnot? I mean, are these people humoring us and listening to you guys or whatever other organizations out there, or are they really taking what we're saying to heart? Because one of the things I worry about is as the number of hunters and anglers decrease to some degree, is our influence waning? Is that something you're seeing?
Yep. It's a great question. So I would say it's both, right? There's some folks that are just kind of humoring us and nodding their head, and then they don't listen and they go do something else. I think there's folks that are listening and are true champions, and I'd call out Senator Stabenow from your home state. I mean, she has been nothing but a champion for sportsmen's issues, and especially as that relates to her position on the Agriculture Committee and the Farm Bill. She's just been amazing. Senator Heinrich out of New Mexico is another that's just amazing. And I think like hunting numbers and fishing, hunter and angling numbers have been going down for the last few decades. And this last kind of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service study that they did, the numbers actually went up again. But percentage-wise, yeah, we're dwindling. And so does that make me nervous? For sure. But we're a constituency that not only are we passionate about our outdoor heritage and kind of the pursuits that we all love, we're also a huge economic driver. We're part of a $646 billion outdoor economy that's generated every year, and if we take care of that, that not only is sustainable, but I think that can grow. And so while percentage-wise we might not be as big as maybe we once were, we still definitely have a seat at the table. And I think for those that are ignoring us, we are we're holding them accountable. And I like to say it like we're calling spades spades. So where folks are doing good things, we really call them out and say thank you. A lot of times elected officials never hear thank you. They get beat up all the time, and so we make a real conscious effort to say thank you when they're doing the right thing. And then on the flip side of that, when they do the wrong thing, we come out and we make sure that they understand that. And what you hope you do in that, there's a little bit of pain. And so that pain, just like when you're training a dog, they don't want that pain. They want to get that treat. And so you help change their behavior through some of that pain. And that's not something we really do lightly. I think there's certain organizations that that's all they do is cry wolf and beat. And I don't think that they have as much influence because everybody knows kind of where they are. From our side, I think people should know where we are as public land advocates. But we're in this game to, again, thank you for doing the right thing, and then spank you for doing the wrong thing. And so, we're not one way or the other, really. And I think people appreciate that about us, but also can hopefully learn from that as well.
Yeah. So kind of in relation to all of that, one of the things that drives me nuts almost more than anything else, and me and Randy Newberg have commiserated about this, and I imagine it probably frustrates you too, is this fact that conservation and wildlife has become so partisan. And you've got one party that says they support sportsmen and they help us with certain things, and then you've got another party that helps us with certain things, but then might not necessarily be pro sportsmen's rights or firearm rights or different things like that. How do you deal with that? How do we deal with that in a world where right now I don't know what to do anymore because I feel like I'm split down the middle with I want this, but I want that.
Yeah, we're a 501c3, and so we don't get involved in political campaigns. In fact, we're barred from doing that, and so we're straight education and kind of influence after somebody gets elected. That said, I think that your listeners and every hunter and angler needs to know and needs to ask questions of their elected officials on where they stand on issues. And I think the NRA has the Second Amendment. And I've heard public lands almost described as a Second Amendment, right? Like it's that important, and it's a litmus test. And if you ask an elected official or somebody that's running, do you support public lands? And like their answer is very telling. And I think we need to educate ourselves that way. And then folks need to get out there and they need to vote, on those issues. And I think if we do that, I think that both parties come back more to the center because that's where conservation is. That's where our history comes from. I mean, again, like you think about clean air, clean water, that was Nixon and ESA, like Endangered Species Act, and that was done, in a Republican administration, but it was with overwhelming support from both sides of the aisle, and that's where we need to get back to, and that's really where the country is. And I think, I wish that our elected officials were too, and I think, that things have become more partisan, and I'm not exactly sure why, but they seem to be getting worse, and hopefully kind of conservation and kind of our hunting and fishing heritage is a place where we can work together, and we've proven that on some cases, and I hope that that becomes less of the exception and more of the rule.
Yeah. So speaking a little bit, what you mentioned, you guys can't participate in the politics and that type of issue, but education is something that sounds like you can do. Do you guys have plans to, or can you at all speak to what the public land policies, the stated public land policies are of the two major candidates right now for president? Because I feel like it's like, what's real? One person says such and such, one person says such and such. I mean, can you speak to what do these two people stand for when it comes to public land? Is that something you can speak to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we did something back when the primary was in Nevada. The Reno Journal, which is a newspaper out of Reno, asked the candidates some questions, and so both Hillary and Donald answered those questions, and we published those. And so it's not us, necessarily saying, we're definitely not saying, hey, this one's better, this one's worse. We're just providing information. And so we've done that, and we'll continue to kind of play that piece. One thing I'd love for us to do that we're just not we're not big enough right now, I think, to do, just because it takes a pretty Herculean effort, but will be to do like a scorecard.
Yeah.
And so, this is how this person voted on, these issues, and you need to know that, right? And again, not saying, hey, go vote for this person or not vote for that person. People can make their own kind of conclusion, but really providing the information. And so that's something I definitely want to do. We just weren't set up to do, this year, and maybe that's something we can engage in next year. You have to be very careful on how you do that, and ask very diverse questions, because it can be seen as leading, and that's not something we want to do. We really want to be more educational. So, for us, I think, on the public lands piece in particular, that Trump kind of set himself aside, apart from the other Republican candidates by saying that he wanted to make sure that public lands stay in public hands. I will say that there were some folks involved in the campaign that either misspoke or there was some confusion within what that actually meant, but said that, man, we own too many public lands, or we have too many public lands, and we need to sell some of that, and that would be a good way for us to work on the national debt. So, I look forward to kind of hearing more about his stance. I haven't seen anything about kind of his platform, but on that specifically. So I'd love to. I don't think it's out yet. And then on the Clinton side, she came out really strongly in support of keeping public lands in public hands. And then I mentioned earlier the kind of $646 billion is generated from outdoor recreation every year. Hillary came out and said that she wants to double that if she was elected, and I think that might be political speak, because I think, one, I don't know if I want another $646 billion out on the ground recreating where you and I are, and I just don't think it's I just don't think it's achievable. But it does show you that I think she's committed to that, that economy and helping grow that economy, which is sustainable. So, on those two issues, I think that's good. I think we're looking at other issues as well, like clean water and how federal agencies are managed and the money that goes into that. And so, I would say we're looking into that piece, just so we kind of know where the candidates are, and then, depending on whoever wins, we're going to work with no matter who wins. And so, trying to figure out, what kind of we would present to them after the election. And so giving them our priorities and saying, hey, this is what we would love for you to do, and then working with them to do that, or, saying that they're doing the opposite at that point.
Yeah. So to this kind of point, when we're looking at the two parties and this whole issue, one of the things that sometimes happens when a sportsman's organization or when someone as an individual starts saying, hey, we should be concerned about that mine that might impact hunting and fishing, or I'm concerned about this, drill going in, or this timber harvest, maybe you start hearing from some people calling you a tree hugger and saying you're some crazy green liberal something or other. And these things start getting thrown. I don't understand when it became a bad thing for a hunter and angler to care about our environment and the habitat where these animals live, but somehow that's happening. And there's one specific example of this I've seen in relation to what you guys are doing, BHA. There's this, I can't remember when this happened, but I don't know, a couple of years ago I posted something that you guys had mentioned, a website link or something like that, and someone started commenting on my post with links to this website for green decoys, saying, backcountry hunters, anglers, and all these guys, they're not really for hunters and anglers, they're green decoys. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, and I appreciate your statement. That why is caring about the places we go hunt and fish, the environment, and how they're managed, how is that in any way, shape, or form anti-hunting? That's what hunters and anglers have been doing in this country really since this conservation ethic started in the late 1800s. And, without hunters and anglers stepping up for clean water, for clean air, for the Wilderness Act, this country is nowhere. And so this is nothing new. I mean, hunters have been stepping up, and I think where this is coming from is it's really like a political kind of wedge tool, right? And that as we become much more effective at what we do. And, we're not saying no to timber harvest. We're not saying no to oil and gas development. We're just talking about it in a sustainable, kind of responsible fashion. And I think some folks see the success that we're having in that space, and they're worried, and so they are using, political campaign tactics where, you trash somebody and try to hurt their credibility in order to undermine what they're doing. And I think that's exactly what they're doing. I mean, the folks that are behind this green decoy site in particular, it's a K Street kind of lobbyist PR firm. The guy that's the head of it, his name's Richard Berman. He's been, called Dr. Evil by 60 Minutes. He advocated against mothers against drunk driving. He told pregnant mothers it was okay to eat mercury-laden fish. He's a bad dude, and he got caught on tape. I believe it was like a year and a half ago. He was at a meeting of oil executives in Colorado, and he was there, and he said, you guys want to hire me because you can either play nice and potentially lose, or you can play dirty with me and we'll win every single time. And was bragging about these just dirty kind of lying tactics. And there was a oil and gas CEO in the room that didn't like what he was hearing, so he got out of his cell phone and he pushed record and he sent that to the New York Times. And so there was a big expose that was done there. Now, Richard Berman and his kind of minions, they revel in that. That's how they do their business. And so that's, no press is bad press for them. And so, I think it's pretty laughable, to be honest. When I first heard it, I was driving down the road, and a friend of mine called me from Louisiana. And I picked up the phone. He's like, have you seen the green decoy stuff? And I was all excited. I thought there was a new, line of decoys that I hadn't heard about, waterfowl hunter. And he started telling me what it was about. I will tell you, they've gone after me personally, and it hurt, and I was pissed, and then I started thinking about it, and really, we should wear this as a badge of honor, and we should wear it as a badge of honor because the only reason they're attacking us is because we are being successful in this space. And to be quite honest, we're a young organization that not a lot of people know about, and I think that's changing every single day. But getting our name out there, helps people start to look at who we are. And for those that don't, that are so dogmatic that they can't really look at us for what we do, it's going to add more fuel to their fire, and they're going to say, "See, you guys are green decoys." But for the people that look at us, go to our website. I mean, I challenge anybody that thinks that we're quote-unquote green decoys. Look at any of the policies that we're engaged in and tell me that that's anti-hunting or anti-fishing, and you just can't do it. And so there's that piece, and then I think the part that was most laughable to me is that calling us kind of like fake hunters. And I used this the other day when I was talking to somebody. Somebody was asking me about it, and I just got back from fishing with my daughter, and I think she had caught 3 brown trout, and so we had kept them, and she turns 8 this summer, and she really wants a knife, for her birthday, so that she can help gut fish and breast like out ducks, and to me, like, she's had more blood on her hands than those guys over in D.C. will ever have, and they're pale white lobbyists from inside K Street. So, to me, like, that's laughable. And so now they're starting to change their tactics. Like, I guess they are real hunters, but, they care about the environment. I'm like, well, just like you said, like, because we care about the environment, we want to make sure we have places that have, elk and deer and fish and ducks. Like, shame on us. Like, sorry about that, but that's what we do. And I hope that, and they don't probably understand the history of hunters. I mean, like, we tax ourselves, we pay licenses that all go back to habitat and conservation. And so we have a long history of stepping up, and we're not going to shy away from that. And so, it's an annoyance for sure. But, we're going to keep our head down and keep doing what we do and not really pay attention to those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, when you read that kind of stuff, just like you said, like, if I think of any single person I know who's a member of BHA, these are the most hardcore guys and girls when it comes to hunting and fishing. I mean, I don't know anyone at all who would fall underneath that fake hunter or anti-hunter, anti-fisherman by any means at all. So like you said, it's pretty laughable, but it does have to be a little bit frustrating when you see that kind of stuff popping up. And for those who are uninformed, when they see that, that's a bummer that's out there. But to your point, badge of honor, you guys are doing a good enough job to get noticed. So.
Yeah, and I think, again, like, to your point, like, I told you that when I used to work for National Wildlife Federation, I'd bring in people from BHA because they're badasses, and they're out there all the time, and this isn't like something that they do once a year to talk about at a cocktail party. It's like a way of life for them, and so, yeah, I mean, we are blessed with a really awesome membership, and we're going to keep doing what we do.
Absolutely. So. We've kind of touched on it a little bit as we've gone through it. I want to talk about a number of the different issues you brought up at the beginning, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think probably the number one issue on most people's minds right now is this whole topic of the transfer or sale of public lands. And we've talked about it several times in the podcast before. We had Randy on the show to talk about it. We've talked with Whit Fosberg about it. But can you give us an update on where things stand now in regards to this whole movement? We haven't talked about it since the whole Bundy deal. We haven't talked about it since some recent votes that happened here just a couple days ago. Can you tell us where things stand now and what that means for us?
Yeah, I think the Bundy deal, as tragic as that was, I think it awakened people that we all are public landowners, and I think one of the things that they said is we're going to return this land to the people. Well, who does that mean? Like, it belongs to all of us right now. What that means is that it goes to a certain group of people, and that that want to extract the resources from that refuge, at least at that point. So I think that really showed some of the hand of that movement. And while you have these kind of extremists, with the Bundy bunch, the folks that are behind them are big money people, and that's what I think is so ridiculous about this whole thing is that it's being sold as this, local control and, more opportunities for people. But the people that are behind this, that's not what they're thinking. Like, they're either licking their chops to have their own piece of property for themselves, or they're looking to exploit it. And after that's done, the fish and wildlife aren't there. So I think that helped, to be totally honest. It's really tragic that somebody had to lose their life and that, we had to spend millions of dollars on this standoff. But I also think that it brought more attention to the issue. One of the things that people do talk about is that this is such an extreme kind of thing that this would never happen, and that this is just kind of some crazy people that are talking about it. And two things I would say about that is that when Theodore Roosevelt set aside this great estate that we have, he didn't do that without detractors. In fact, there was senators from my home state of Montana and Idaho that fought him vehemently about it. and ultimately made it so he couldn't, set aside any more national forests because they wanted to, exploit these resources. And, again, like we have plenty of timber that gets taken off of public lands, but it's done sustainably. And so those people were around when he set that land aside, and then about every 10, 15 years, it seems like they raise their head again, and that's where we're at right now. And, for those who don't think it's real, we had 2 votes in the Natural Resources Committee yesterday in the House, and there was one bill that would let any single state that had federally managed public lands in their state just take 2 million of those over, like whatever they wanted. And that passed out of the Natural Resources Committee. It was mostly on party line votes. There was one Republican in particular that crossed party lines, Representative Zinke here from Montana, which we definitely appreciate. But that has an opportunity now to go to the House floor and or be attached to some must-pass piece of legislation, which is a real thing. The other bill didn't give outright transfer of title of the land, but what it did is it gave the ability for states to take over 200 to 900,000 acres in their states of public land and then manage them, not for multiple use, which is what our federally managed public lands are for, Forest Service and BLM lands, but for the sole purpose of raising money. And so when I hear the sole purpose of raising money, red flags go off in my head right away. And that's either extractive industry, which means, rape and pillage, potentially, to where that, habitat's not there anymore. And or that could mean, if they want hunting and fishing to go on there, that means they're probably going to lease it out to somebody. And you and I don't have access, but the people with means, the billionaires of the world, like that would be their own private kind of place. And so that bill passed out of the Natural Resources Committee as well. Unfortunately, that same Montana senator voted for that one, and so. Both of these now are pieces that can move to the floor, can be attached, and they're scary, real things. I will say that there's not many legislative days left. I think it's like 15 or less before the election, and so they'd be hard pressed to get something done. That said, there's going to be must-pass pieces of legislation that they could potentially attach this stuff to, and there'll be a lame duck session, after. The election, before the new Congress takes place, which, lots of times there's a lot of movement there. So these are real things, and when I hear people say, "Oh, this is just some extremist," I'm like, "Here's an example. Here's an example. Here's an example where this is happening right now," and hopefully you change their mind. And so, I think for folks right now that are listening and want, are pissed about these 2 bills making it through committee, like you can call up your congressman right now and ask them, to make sure that these things don't see the light of day on the House floor, and become reality. So that's something you can do right now. And I think there's a switchboard number, and I know this is that folks might not be able to get this number down or whatever, but it's 202-224-3121, and that number will get you to the switchboard. Then you ask for your local representative, and that'll get you right to them. And you can make that call today. And I would encourage people to do that. And really, the message is that we want to keep public lands in public hands and say no to both of those bills.
Yeah, this is like you said, it's kind of scary. Like I had heard about this for a long time and have been advocating for the fact that we need to make sure this movement doesn't build up too much steam. But in the back of my mind, I always thought, they're going to hear us. They're going to hear the sportsmen and all the other outdoor recreators. I mean, there's a lot of people making a fuss about this on our side of this issue, and I'm kind of shocked that these things are still moving forward given all of that concern that we're raising, because I feel like there is a strong movement on the sportsmen, on the outdoor recreationalists, all of us. I feel like there's a strong movement building there. I'm kind of shocked and concerned that this type of thing is still moving forward in a fashion like that. That's kind of concerning, isn't it?
Oh, it's super concerning, and the reason that that's happening is because of the amount of money that's behind this effort, right? Like when you think about like the billionaires that are licking their chops right now, and either on how to make more money, through exploitation, or to have their own, honey hole. Like, no joke, they're out there. I mean, there's a couple brothers that are fracking billionaire kind of tycoons from Texas that here in the last decade have now become the number one landowner in Montana, and they're buying private land, and that's great for them, and they have every right to do that. But if public land was put on the chopping block, who do you think is going to buy that? And it's them, or it's like these big companies, and to me, that's why this is still going on, and we need to continue to step up as a community. I'm really glad that you mentioned kind of the outdoor rec. I feel like they're a voice that is just kind of starting to come into their own. So the kayakers, the mountain bikers, the hikers, and they have a kind of a TRCP-like organization out in D.C. called the Outdoor Alliance, and so I think they're becoming more and more active, and we're working with them closely. Then there's an organization called the Outdoor Industry Alliance that's all the kind of manufacturers and the business side of the outdoor economy or outdoor kind of community. And so, they're starting to step up, and I got to think that we will win, but we can't let off the gas. And, I talked about how Roosevelt had his own detractors, and since then, we've had stewards that have stepped up for, over 100 years. And I feel like right now, at this time, like it's our jobs to do our part to make sure that, we keep these public lands in public hands. And so that, my daughter and her, kids, if she ever has kids, have something to fight for, because this is not going to go away. These guys, there's so much money at stake and there's so much money behind it that they're not going to go away. And so it's, it's our part to kind of do our best job of being stewards right now. But, we got to make sure that those next generations care about this stuff too.
Yeah, so true. One thing I just kind of popped in my head as we're talking about this is the fact that one of the kind of speaking points that some that are in favor of this have raised continuously is the fact that, we just want to transfer the land to the states because the states know the land better, they can better manage it, et cetera, et cetera. And we've talked about this before, but I think some recent studies or articles have come out talking about some examples of states that have maybe not done that with their land, and there have been some examples of how the states have been selling off their land. Can you speak to any of that? I mean, what are there any examples of this type of thing going the way that we would not want it to go, where a state has public land and either is not managing it well or starts selling it off? I think Idaho was the example I'd seen.
So Idaho, Idaho originally was granted 3.6 million acres. They've sold off 1 million of that, so that's a third. Let's see, a good one would be Nevada, right? People talk about how there's there's not much private land in Nevada. Well, when they became a state, they got 2.7 million acres. They got 3,000 acres left. 3,000. New Mexico is another great example, 13 million acres, and now they have 9 million left. And so there is tons of precedent where they're selling public land. And what happens is that these states they don't have the resources to manage them, and so what they do, they're faced with a couple options. They can raise taxes, and the last politician that did that is not a politician anymore, right? Nobody goes out and says I'm going to go raise taxes, and so I don't think that's really an option. The next one is that they can exploit them, which they're doing already, and they don't necessarily aren't places that we all want to go hunt and fish. And the third one is that they sell them, and they've proven that they're doing that. I mean, they're trying to do that in your home state right now. And for me, there's state land, and for your listeners that do hunt and fish on state land, a lot of the times those are wildlife management areas. And those are specifically to protect the habitat and then provide opportunities for you and I. And those are a small portion of the lands that the states actually manage. And when you think about this piece, the only way the states could afford these new lands and the management of them would be not to have them as wildlife management areas, but really have them as money generators. And that's where we lose every time. And I think they don't consider road maintenance. They don't consider. I mean, we talked about fire a little bit earlier. What's your path forward on addressing fire? And really, they don't have a path forward. or they say, oh, the federal government they'll pay for it, and then we'll do other stuff. And that, to me, it just doesn't make sense. So, they want local control, or, quote unquote local control, because they want to exploit it, and that's just really where it's at.
Mm-hmm. That's what it seems like. So, in the future, I'm kind of curious. I guess two things. First, what is your vision for where BHA is going to be? Maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I guess Let's go with that first. What's the future look like for BHA?
So I think the future for me, we already talked about how we brought on chapters this last year in Michigan and Wisconsin. We're about ready to bring one on in Texas, which is I'm super excited about, in a place of only 2% public land. And they're fired up because they know what they don't have, and they know that they want to kind of change the dialogue that's happening in Texas. That the majority of that is like, let's get it and sell it to the highest bidder. So where we want to be, I'd say chapters in all 50 states, because then that provides us an opportunity to be more effective at a federal level and more effective at a state level. So that'd be the first one. I think like for me, it's like really diversifying our money. We have many different sources of money right now, but I'd love for our membership to grow, and so that's like it's a major contributor right now. But I'd like that to be like the major contributor, not only for just the money for the organization and consistent money, but also that you have more clout when you have more members, and so growing that is nothing but good for us, and so I think that's where I'd like to be. I think we talked about it just for a minute, but I think having BHA be a leader within the sportsman space, which we're getting there, but even more of a leader. But then also being able to work with kind of some non-traditional partners like the outdoor rec community. I think that's something that I'd like to see, a more solidified partnership there. And then I'd really I want us to be represent kind of what America looks like. And so that means more women involved in our organization. I think we're doing an okay job at that right now. I mean, we're very welcoming to women, but we could have more in our ranks. And so I think that's something where I'd like us to be. And then, the Latino community, the Black community, like all those other kind of different minority communities that are in the United States and make us who we are as a country. I'd like to have them involved in our organization too, and so I think I'd probably stop there. But those are the things that I would call out on kind of where I'd like us to be in 5 or 10 years.
That's awesome. So for our listeners, there's got to be imagine there's a lot of people now listening to this that this resonates with, because when I first heard about what you guys are doing, it really resonated with me. So for those people that want to get involved, sure, they can become a member, but what if in some of these other states, I've got people that want to be part of a chapter, that want to have a local presence? How does someone go about helping a chapter become formed in their state if you guys don't already have one? I mean, do they just need to become members, or can they become members and call you guys or shoot you an email and say, hey, I want to help start a chapter in South Carolina or whatever? How does that work?
Yeah, so, we kind of, there's two main factors, I think, with starting a chapter. So the first one is just like a good membership base, and so making sure that that it's not just a couple people in that state, and we have members in all 50 states. I think that Texas chapter, that the Texas folks, I think they have 78 or so members down in Texas right now, and so we feel like that's enough people to draw kind of a leadership team out of, and so that'd be the second piece, is really good leadership. So membership numbers are important, but leadership is even more important than that. And so I think, I can't remember the number of volunteers that you guys have on the board. We're north of 10. Is that right? How many people are on the board in Michigan?
I think we've got 12 board members.
Okay, so 12 people. They're geographically distributed in some way and bring a lot of different talents, but are all, from what I can tell, and I'm looking forward to when I can travel there and meet all you guys face to face. But like from what I can tell, just from phone calls and just your engagement, either through social media, what you've done at the state legislature, like I knew it when it happened, but you guys are proving that you are leaders. And so, if you want to help start a state chapter, partly that's like picking up the phone and saying, hey, I'm a member and I want to start a state chapter, and then we can talk to you kind of how we get that done. And, it's increasing membership and then, finding leadership. And by picking up that phone and wanting to do more, that's that goes back to that Roosevelt quote, like you're taking that next step, and that's leadership to me every single time. And so, I think folks listening to this, you don't have a chapter in your state, we'd love to talk to you kind of about that piece. And, I've mentioned a couple, Texas, of Carolinas are talking about it right now, or folks in Carolinas. So these conversations are happening, and the more that we have people reaching out to us saying that they want to become part of a chapter leadership, then we know that we have, leaders in that state, and that we can kind of have critical mass and go from there. So kind of a long-winded way of saying about it, but I think, if you want to get engaged, like give us a call, and we'll figure out how we get that done.
I might be a little bit biased, but I feel like this audience, the Wired Hunt Nation, like these are a lot of serious hunters and anglers and outdoorsmen who appreciate what we have and who I know can step up and will step up. So I have confidence in all of you guys and girls out there right now that some of you will do this, because I think there's such an opportunity, and I think a lot of you guys are probably just as passionate as me and Land and so many other hunters and anglers out there about what we can do when we work to preserve these public lands and fair chase and access to hunt and fish. It's central to who we are, so I don't know why we wouldn't try to do everything we can to make sure it's around in the future for our children and grandchildren and that kind of thing. So now here's my next.
Amen.
Yeah. So here's my next question, Land. Other than getting involved with BHA, we've talked a couple times about that, taking that next step, as Teddy said. What would be a couple examples of things that people can do if they want to take that next step, other than just becoming a member or maybe leading a chapter, something like that? What can we do in our daily lives in this world?
I think one of the biggest things that folks can do is start talking to other people. And right now, I think the biggest threat to hunting and angling is this complacency. And folks, we're living in pretty darn good times. National Wild Turkey Federation has been highly successful and has brought turkeys. They're everywhere now in this country. Like, that's amazing. There's places that I grew up that never had a turkey that now are chock full. And so we have, same thing can be said about white-tailed deer, elk populations that are at all-time highs. And the list kind of goes on and on and on. And so, with that kind of success that we have, or that we're enjoying right now, like we're in the those good old days, I feel like right now, like people are complacent and they don't understand that like really we could lose that in a generation. And so I think people need to talk. Like I think one of the biggest things that people can talk about is to people about this heritage that we have, how awesome it is, but the only reason it's awesome is because people have been stepping up. So I think that'd be part of that conversation. The next conversation, I think, is that, this public landowner piece is that, we are all public landowners, and every single person has a stake in these public lands. And, if you're from New York City and don't ever feel like you're ever going to get out of the city, but want to someday and go recreate on public lands, you own a piece of America. And so you should really care about that. So I think the conversation is the first one. And then, it's this get informed. I think we can provide. We'll give you information and really help you make informed decisions. But I'd be real short-sighted to say that we're the only source of information. Like, get out there. Like, the internet, is a crazy place, and you can learn a lot of things. And I would say get out there and learn that. And then when you're doing this learning, don't just learn about what's going on right now. Learn a little bit about our history. And we as hunters and anglers could be much better served if we knew more about our history. Because then you kind of know where we came from, kind of what we've done, which one is really inspiring, but also it shows that that we can do it. So I think that piece on education, And the last piece that I would say that people can do is really that civic engagement. And so, don't just become a member, don't just tell your friends about us, but really make a phone call to an elected official. Show up at a meeting, and talk about how your local refuge is going to be managed. Like those kind of individual efforts, they go a long ways. And something I haven't said tonight that I want to say now is that a lot of people feel like their voice doesn't count. And so why should I do anything? And why should I step up? And I talk to elected officials a lot, and some I know more, are better than others. And so you can have these conversations like that they'll be real kind of honest with you. And you ask them about this kind of grassroots piece. And so one of the things I ask them is like, when you guys get a phone call, what does that mean? And they're like, well, we think that represents 100 other people. Wow. And so you think about, making. Let's say now you made that call, and you're representing 100 people. Well, you got your buddy and another buddy to call, so now you're, those numbers are jumping up right away, and so your voice does count, and your voice counts at that elected official level, and it definitely counts at the kind of administrative level where you're making comments on plans, and so that's the last piece I would say is step up and get engaged. And I think sometimes it's a process for people. Sometimes people don't want to jump in with both feet, and I totally understand that. But as you learn more about kind of our heritage, what we have now, and what's at stake, I almost guarantee you that you want to get involved because, like you say, the folks that are listening right now, they're very passionate and very committed, hunters and anglers, and I just can't. I know that folks are going to want to get involved because they care so much about this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of making phone calls, can you share that number again, that switchboard number? Because that's great. There's a simple number. You call that number, and it sounds like you just mentioned which representative you're trying to get a hold of, and you're patched through. Is that right?
Yep. So it's a U.S. Capitol switchboard, so it's 202-224-3121.
Perfect.
And I think the simple message of, make sure that anything you vote on, that you're keeping public lands in public hands.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty simple, quick little thing each one of us could do right now to probably make a really positive difference. Because like you said, if one phone call represents probably about 100 people in their eyes, holy smokes. Can you imagine if 100 of us did that right now, or 1,000 of us? That's
huge.
That's powerful.
It's huge, and I mean, at the end of the day, what we all need to remember is that these are politicians and they want to be elected for another term. And so the more that they hear on a certain issue, the more they're going to pay attention to that issue because it has to do with their reelection. And so when you step up and you make that phone call, they will listen.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one other thing you mentioned a few minutes ago was the importance of understanding our history as hunters and conservationists, and I 100% agree. I've been doing a lot of reading and trying to better understand the history myself, but I'm curious, do you have any resources you'd recommend or books or anything to help someone learn more about that history?
Great question. So we actually have some interns in our office right now, and so they've been thirsty for that stuff too. I'd say like almost any biography on Theodore Roosevelt is a good place to start. And just he's kind of the godfather of conservation, made it a kind of a national priority. And so just kind of learning how he came to that, and he came to that pretty honestly. He came to that as a hunter. He spent a lot of time out here in the West and Upper Midwest chasing critters around, and that's where he kind of got this passion. So I think reading, just kind of about the way he came to conservation and then what he did as a president, I think is pretty grounding. There's a book by Rieger, R-E-I-G-E-R, and it's like the title is like the origins of like sportsman conservation, and I might get that wrong, but the author's name is Rieger, R-E-I-G-E-R, and he goes through the history of kind of the late 1800s into kind of like the dirty 30s where Ducks Unlimited was formed, the National Wildlife Federation was formed, then through like kind of like the Clean Air and Clean Water Act stuff in the 1970s, and so it gives you a great kind of history piece there. I think Sand County Almanac by Aldo Leopold, who they call like the godfather, of game management, I think is an unbelievable read. And I will say that I think he wrote that in the 40s. what he wrote about in the 40s is still pertinent today. And you know, a lot of the things he talked about in there, you know, fair chase, or even kind of just conservation practices, and how all parts matter, not just, you know, the megafauna that you and I chase. It's all important to that kind of ecosystem. I think it's a great read, and it's not that long, and so I think that would be one I would read. And then, you know, I think, you know, Field and Stream has a conservation blog, and they call it Conservationists, and so Hal Herring writes for that, and Bob Marshall writes for that, and I think both those guys are, one, smart as hell, but two, great at kind of like talking about the issues. So I think those are some of the resources I would go to. And, you know, if folks want more, that's quite a bit to start with. If they want more, they can feel free to contact me and really, or, you know, somebody on our staff, and we can think about other resources.
Yeah, that's awesome. Those are, I've read or checked out most of those, and I 100% agree. Really good suggestions. Another one that's an interesting one is a book called The Last Stand. I think it's by Michael Punke or something like that. And that book was about specifically the history of the buffalo, but then the story of George Bird Grinnell, and then eventually what he did through Forest and Stream, you know, the precursor to Field and Stream, and then eventually how he worked with Teddy and the rest of the group to form the Boone and Crockett Club, and all the impact that they had. That's another really interesting one to add to that list.
You know, I've heard about that book, Mark, but I've not read it. So thank you for the reminder, and that is now on the list.
Yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. I read it while stuck in a tent in the middle of basically a monsoon while hunting elk last year in Idaho, up in the backcountry. So I was up there trying to weather the storm, and read some good hunting conservation literature. So,
and thank goodness you had that book, right? Like,
exactly.
Like you might have gone crazy in that tent with that rain for hours upon hours, right?
I really probably would have. So it was a lifesaver.
That's good.
Yeah. So here's probably my final question, Land. I think for all of us, you know, when we think about these types of issues, you know, protecting our hunting heritage, these different landscapes, these animals, for many of us, I think there is a certain place maybe that we think about, or that connects with us in some kind of special way, that initially brought that passion, or has helped us kind of realize, wow, I want to do something to protect this place or these animals or this experience. Do you have a place or an experience, or is there something special within the hunting and fishing world that really resonates with you deep down more than anything else?
So if it's all right, I'm going to answer that in two ways.
Go ahead.
The first one is I think I mentioned, you know, my father passed away, and I was 20 years old. I've been out in Seattle just kind of messing around, and so I came home to be with my family when he passed away. And still really kind of hadn't found my way. And one night I was going home after a late night kind of carousing with friends, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I live about 3 miles out of town. That's where I grew up, and a mountain lion ran across my path in front of me. And then it stopped on the side of the road, and then it kind of looked at me and then ran again across in front of the road. And like to see that apex predator and that close for one was just amazing to watch that. Its back never really moved. It just kind of glided, you know, it ran across. Like that to me was like this, if I had to point to like a moment, was really that piece that, you know, I'd kind of been lost after my father passed away, and like it was like, it kind of struck me then. And so, you know, I'm very fortunate to have that experience. I say the special place for me is the Bob Marshall Wilderness, and there's a couple places that I won't tell you about that are in the wilderness that I visit. One is a place that I go fish. It's pretty hard to get into. Went in there last year with my wife for our anniversary. Cutthroat are hungry on every single cast, and you're alone. And then the other place is a place where we go elk hunt all the time up there, and I go in there with my family every year, and you know, those two places are just, they're so special to me. And I think, you know, I don't know how you are with this, but you know, I live in this crazy world where, you know, I'm going, you know, kind of balls to the wall all the time. I'm connected through my cell phone. I'm on the, you know, on my phone or on my computer, you know, almost all day, and it's really hard for me to turn that off. And when I go into the Bob Marshall, I'm forced to do that, and I don't have cell phone access up there. And, you know, I bring my cell phone, and that's the only reason I bring my cell phone is so that I can use it as an alarm and also take pictures with it, because it's pretty light, you know. Mm-hmm. And they take great pictures nowadays. And so, like, but it's that place that I can escape, and you know, the revitalization I get from going to the Bob is just spectacular, and you know, I hope that that's there for everybody, for future generations, and that, you know, I want everybody that's listening to this to think about that place. You know, think about the last time that you were there, and, you know, maybe not the trigger that you pulled or the arrow that you let fly or the fish that you caught, but, like, you know, what the breeze felt like on the back of the neck, you know, and that afternoon nap that you took there, and we're at total peace. Like, that's where I find my solace, and I think everybody else, that's one of the reasons why we do what we do, is to have those experiences. And so the Bob Marshall is that place for me, and, you know, I'll vehemently, you know, help protect that place for the rest of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of us can relate to those experiences and feelings, and the importance of having somewhere you can just get away from it all. And whether that's, you know, hundreds of thousands of acres in the Bob, or whether that's 100 acres of public land down the road, or just your back 40 that maybe you own, whatever it is, having wild places, undeveloped places to some degree where we can reconnect with nature and wildlife. I mean, that's so important, and unfortunately it's becoming an increasingly rare opportunity for people in this country. So I think, you know, like you said, we're not making any more of it. We've got to do something to make sure what we have that's left stays that way. So
totally. Those, I mean, I think that's, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, like, the kind of the difference. I mean, sometimes people think, you know, us at Backcountry, all we care about is like these big, huge, you know, 1,000,000-acre wildernesses, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. The way you just described that, like those places where you go find that escape or that connection to nature, we all know what that feels like, and that's what we want to protect. Is we want to protect kind of like, it's not like a definition of how big Backcountry is, but it's more like that experience and that feeling you get when you're there. And, you know, we do that on public land. So, yeah, like, think about your place and think about what that would be like if you couldn't go there anymore, or the vastly changed. And I think that it's definitely motivating for me, and I think it's motivating to a lot of people.
Absolutely. So if anyone out there wants to learn more about backcountry hunters and anglers, where can they go online to do that?
So our website is just, you know, backcountryhunters.org. So very easy. You can just Google our name too, and it'll come right up. Just got a new website, so I'm pretty excited about the look and feel of that. Our Facebook page is very robust. We had Randy Newberg do a thing last night.
Yeah.
On Facebook Live. I think he was on there for like an hour and 40 minutes or something like that. And so it's the Facebook, you know, something we're posting on 2 or 3 times a day. Very consistent, great way to learn more about us. And then, you know, we're on Instagram and Twitter as well. Instagram is more about pictures, and Twitter is more about kind of really interacting with elected officials. But all those platforms, the last one I guess I would say is that we have a YouTube channel, and within that YouTube channel we have a thing called Backcountry College, so all skills, which is pretty awesome. We've got a guy out of Idaho named Clay Hayes that we call our professor, because he's one of the most woodsy guys I've ever been around, and I learned something every time watch one of those. So those are the platforms, and, you know, find out more about us, and then once you do, become a member, you know, and if you got questions, you know, I think one thing that's also unique about our organization is that I'm very accessible. You know, our entire staff is very accessible. So if you have questions, you know, give us a call, and if we don't get you right then, we'll get back to you, and or shoot us an email, and we'll definitely at least try to answer your questions. If we can't, we'll try to find somebody that can.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure to link to all that stuff. So if anyone listening wants to do that, you can just head over to the blog post, click those links, or go right to, like Lan said, backcountryhunters.org. And I'll echo your sentiment, Land. I just highly recommend everyone listening to go out and become a member. And selfishly, I'm on the membership committee for the board in Michigan, so it's my job to try to add new members. So come on, guys, help me out. Become a member in Michigan if you're in my home state. Join the team, and we'll hopefully get to meet up for this in these upcoming functions too. So
that's awesome. If everybody that was a membership chair across the country had your platform, we'd be doing even better, right? Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Lan, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you taking the time to chat.
Oh, for sure. Anytime.
Absolutely. Well, let's hopefully stay in touch, and maybe we'll do this again. And maybe while I'm out west here, we can bump into each other and grab a drink or a coffee or something.
Love that, dude. I love that. Anytime that, you know, if those stars align, I'd love to do that. And like I said, but, you know, I want to make sure that in this next year that I figure out a way to get out and see you guys in Michigan too.
That'd be awesome.
My parents my parents went to the University of Michigan, and I have pictures of me when I was 2 years old in the big house. So I don't know if you're an MSU guy or a UM guy, but like I'm definitely a Wolverine, and it'd be fun to come back.
Oh no, Land! That's a horrible way to end.
I did it. It was like this great conversation until right then, right?
I'm a Michigan State alum.
Oh man, it's in your blood.
Oh, it runs green and white, very thick. But I won't hold it against you.
All right. We
Land.
can have a friendly kind of bet around that thing too.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right, sounds good, bud.
All right, bye-bye. All right, so there you have it, another episode in the books. But before we go, we need to thank our partners who help keep this podcast on the air. So big thank you to Sitka Gear, Trophy Ridge, Bear Archery, Redneck Blinds, Huntera Maps, Ozonics, Carbon Express, Maven Optics, and the Whitetail Institute of North America. And finally, thank you all for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about BHA, and I hope you'll all join me in getting involved. And of course, I hope you'll stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. You simply pour a can into your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. So pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.